Hey guys, welcome back to Bunker's Custom Bikes. Today, we're going to be working on the engine. We got this 77 Shovelhead engine, and we're going to get it stripped down and rebuilt. We got an engine, new oil lines, and a complete gasket set. So, let's get it done. So before we get started in tearing it down, I know a lot of you watching this video are probably very familiar with the Shovelhead engines, but for those of my viewers who are not, we'll just kind of do a quick breakdown of all the parts on it. So, it gets its name, Shovelhead, from the iconic shovel-shaped heads it has, not to be confused with the pan head or the knuckle head or the iron head or the Evo or the Milwaukee 8, which are the other models. But the rest of the parts going down, you've got the cylinder heads themselves, the cylinders or the jugs, you've got your intake. These are the lifters, push rods. The lifters are underneath. The lifters sit underneath. This is the timing points, which the guy has the camshaft underneath that. Coming around, you have the oil pump. I know it's a little far away, but you got the oil pump with your supply, return, your oil pressure gauge. This is a crankcase vent up here. Come around again. On this side, not a whole lot. You've got the motor mount, spark plugs. This is your primary drive, not to be confused with the primary. It's also the crankshaft, you call it whatever you want. Sometimes this is gear driven, or excuse me, not gear driven, chain driven, and in this case it's belt driven. Behind this black circle here is the stator, which makes your electricity. That's where the stator comes out, and that's pretty much it. It's a dry sump engine, supposed to be, which means it has an external oil tank that holds all the oil. There is going to be a little bit of oil left in it, but not too much. But today, I just kind of want to get it torn down, make sure that it's in good condition before we try and put it on the bike and start it, and replace some gaskets along the way. So really, I'm just going to focus on the top end. So we're going to do, head gaskets, we're going to check valve clearance, all that stuff. And I'm going to also open up the oil pump and make sure that's good to go. I'll probably check the bottom end, but I'm not going to really tear the bottom end apart. I don't feel like going that far in depth with it. And it's in a new case, so I've got work receipts from the person who put it in the new case and made it a stroker. So I'll assume that it's good, but we'll still just double check. So first thing I want to do is I want to take the timing cover off that has the ignition points underneath it. So this is just a 3/32 Allen wrench. For all of you who are return viewers on my channel, I know I work on a lot of Japanese and European bikes that are all metric size, but this is a American motor, so everything is SAE or standard. So instead of this being like a 3.5 millimeter, it's a 3/32. So there's the cover, our gasket, and you see behind it, it's the points. And this actually has an upgraded Dyna-S ignition, so that's a digital ignition rather than the mechanical points. So that's pretty cool. Basically, it just uses a Hall effect sensor and sees a signal of the magnet every time it spins by, and that gives signal to the coil to go ahead and give it a spark. So that's a pretty cool system. That retails for about like $400, so that's pretty cool. Dyna makes another adjustable one where you can actually adjust the timing and the advance as it gets up to speed. That one's a little more expensive, so we're not using that one. Next, we're going to do the oil lines. So, talking about the oil lines with this motor, you've got, all the internal oil galleys and oil channels inside of the motor, but then coming from the bottom end of the crankcase, you've got this oil line here that comes up to the rear cylinder, goes through the rocker box of the rear cylinder, comes across this oil line, and then into the front cylinder. So really, this front cylinder doesn't really get much oil until the rear cylinder gets oil. So, I got this oil line kit, and it basically solves that problem. So it plugs into where the oil comes out here down the bottom, and it goes to both cylinders at the same time. So it oils both cylinders, and then it comes with a plug for the bottom here, and then obviously the oil drains back down through the channels back into the crankcase. So let's get these oil lines off and we'll put this on. So, got the oil lines off. These are just 1/2-inch nuts. You kind of unscrew them there. They're compression fittings, and they come right off. We're not going to reuse those. We'll set those aside. We also need to take these fittings off because our new oil lines come with new fittings. So we'll get those off now. And they're also 1/2-inch. All the old oil fittings are off. Next thing we're going to work on is the rocker boxes. So again, these are not to be confused with valve covers. While they do cover the valves, they are rocker boxes because these arms come up here, hit the rockers, which engage the valves, and they are inside these boxes. So each of these little, I'm not going to call them plugs, but these bolts are. And they are held on with 2, 4, 6, 8 nuts on each side. Get that off next. So I'm going to say if you ever want to use an impact gun while disassembling or assembling things, I always suggest you use the socket wrench before and after. So I use the socket wrench or just a regular wrench to break the nuts loose, and then I'll put the zip gun on it, or I'll use the zip gun to get them just tight, and then I'll use the socket wrench to actually bring them to spec. So let's get these the rest of the way off. There's going to be a lot of parts and nuts and screws, so I suggest getting a couple boxes just to keep them in. So stuff like this. This is where all these screws will go. Or nuts, excuse me, not screws. And they're going to fall all over the place. Definitely good to have a good organized workspace too. But organization is not something that Bonus Custom Bikes does. Just kidding, we're very organized. Also, while I'm doing this, y'all have really been enjoying these Shovelhead videos, which is awesome. I love seeing the engagement. The last video, I believe, it should be pushing close to 1,000 views now, which for a small channel like mine, that's pretty awesome. Alright, probably gonna need a mallet to get the actual rocker box off. So you can see here, we got the studs. They look in decent shape. These are the push rods and the valves. You've got your exhaust valve, your intake valve. The valves look okay. I'm not seeing any problems with the seats. They actually look like they were replaced not too long ago. I'll bet this whole motor was reworked when they put it in the new case. And this is why this is called a rocker box. If you see, the rocker arms are inside here, and they sit on a rod that lubricates them. There is gaskets here and here. This is a gasketed surface. As you can see, here's the gasket. That's going to get replaced. And if I can get it off. But it's real important if you're not going to take the rockers out, which I'm not, because they don't appear to have any, insidious amounts of play in them. So I'm going to leave those in there. Make sure you don't get dirt in them, because if you do, it really could mess your engine up. I also like to make sure that I mark these, so I'll probably put an F underneath on this one and then an R underneath on that one for front and rear. That way I just don't get it mixed up. Let's get the other one off. Alright, there's the rear cylinder. Nope, washer. Again, not much play. However, it looks like these were reworked a little bit. If you can see, those walls were grinded down or ground down. I don't know. But I mean, they still feel healthy. I'm assuming that was done just to run clearance for bigger valve springs, but I don't know. And like I said, I'll write an R on this one for rear. And I always keep all the old gaskets with the parts that come off. That way you can kind of match them up when you put it back together. So there you go. R for really cool shovel head. Next thing, I'm going to get the rocker arms off. I keep calling them rocker arms. The push rods. And these just slide right out. They are different lengths, so make sure you keep them organized over which goes which. The intake valve is going to be shorter, and your exhaust valve is going to be a little bit longer. So we'll keep those in there for now. And we'll get the cylinder heads off. So when you take these push rods out, put my Sharpie away, just check them. Make sure there's no pitting, no rust, cracks. This is the rear exhaust push rod. Make sure that the oil passage is clear. There's no obstructions in there. And if they're good, hang on to them. I mean, they are usable or disposable parts, I guess. but it takes a lot to wear down the ends. So we'll hang out. I like these. So we just got the top motor mount off. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to take the cylinder heads off. So on this, in most vehicles, you know, the cylinder head bolts are on top and squish the cylinder head to the cylinder. Well, on these Shovelheads, the cylinder head bolts are down here. They're 12 point, and I'm not sure. They look like 12 point half inch. Let's see. No, smaller than half inch. So I'll figure out what size that is, and we'll get those cylinder head bolts off. We got the rear head off, and it is just 5 of these 12 point bolts. These guys right here. You see the 12 point. And honestly, I would not wish this on my worst enemy. It is so hard to get to them from down here. There's not much room up against the cylinder wall, and the fact that it's a 12 point honestly kind of makes it even harder to get at. But I've found that even though it's a standard size bolt, I believe it's a 7/16 12 point. Yeah, but I found that an 11 millimeter actually fits on it better. So I used an 11 millimeter, kind of cracked them loose, and then I call it a wiggle bit. Got this guy on there, and then you kind of just work it out. Not easy to do. But let's get this other cylinder head off. At long last, it's off. These cylinder heads look pretty good. I mean, there's not a lot of carbon buildup. The valves don't look burnt. They look good. Yeah, I mean, not much to say about them. That's it. You can definitely tell that this motor was reworked recently. I'll get the phone in here in a second, but I mean, the cylinder walls look like they're honed. I mean, they still have the edges in them, the grooves. So, you know, I'll still pull the jugs off, but let's check it out. So it might be kind of hard to see. Actually, there you go. You can see that these cylinder walls look, I mean, fantastic. The tops of the cylinder, or the pistons themselves, they got a little bit of carbon buildup, but that's, you know, expected. Even over here, they look great. It's got some gasket material. These people who did it before just put RTV on everything. So we'll get this head gasket off, and then we'll pull the jugs and take a look at the piston rings. So once you get these 4 corner nuts loose on the cylinders, they just kind of pry off. They may need a little bit of persuasion. Just be careful you don't scratch the mating surface. And then that's it. So there's the jug. And that would be the rear jug. So we'll put that with the rear stuff. And then same thing for the front side. So while we're here, I mean, these pistons look great. I mean, they brand new rings. They look awesome. The rings are indexed correctly. I'm not going to check the ring gap because I'm not really rebuilding anything or putting a new bore in the cylinders. So I'm just going to trust the ring gap. It was building compression before, so it should be building compression now. Let's pry this other jug off. So that's the engine. You can see I've got the pistons. I'll clean those up, clean the piston heads up. Connecting rods, that's the crankshaft down there. I'm not going to spin it a lot because I'm not really holding it. I don't want to damage the pistons, but as you see, it rotates freely. You know, definitely protect this. If you're going to leave it out, stick some towels in here because you don't want stuff falling down into the case. That's bad news bears. So I'm going to stick some towels in it, and then we're going to work on the oil pump. So these Harley oil pumps are really quite easy to get off. You've got the pump face, the pump cover that just has these 3 bolts holding it on. Pull that off, and then you've got 2 more bolts behind it holding the pump to the engine. So let's go ahead and get that apart. And these are 7/16 again, just like the head bolts. We'll get them loose. Now there's a lot of small parts in this pump, so be very careful taking it apart and taking it out because you don't want to lose stuff, especially if it falls into the case. That's just generally not a good time. So again, we're going to get ourselves a little box to put everything in when we take it apart. Box. So later on, we're gonna take just the electronic sensor off, and I'm gonna put an actual fuel gauge on it. I think that would look kind of cool. Oh, there's a fourth bolt. Whoops. There we go. I think that would look kind of cool with the little gauge on it. And we'll just work this off. We don't want to go prying on it or anything like that. All right, and there she is. And, probably have something nearby to clean up some oil. It's always just going to have a little bit residual left in the pump, and that's okay. So the only gasket, really, is this one right here on the pump face, or the pump cover. It's still leaking. There's 2 O-rings in here, and we'll get those out. Definitely make sure that you don't lose these gears. Those are what makes the pump actually pump. As you see, it's kind of already wants to squirt oil out of those gears, and that's how it works. Builds that pressure up. But let's get this pump off. And like I said, once you get those first 4 bolts off, it's just these last 2 at the top. These up here is the pressure regulator and the check valve. So there's a little ball down in here that actually has a spring on it, and that keeps the oil from just flooding the engine and sumping. And then there's the pressure relief valve here, where if the pump gets overpressurized, it'll send that pressure back up to the tank. If either of those are not working correctly, you're going to have a problem. I mean, you're either going to sump all your oil and then not have any picked up, or you're going to overpressurize your engine, blow seals, blow gaskets. None of that's good. So we're going to double check those just to make sure they're good, and then we'll put the pump back together. So when you're taking this pump apart, there's 2 gears. This gear here is driven off the pinion in the engine. So there's a little tiny clip right there that you got to get off to get the pump body off. This one is just kind of free spinning. It's sitting on a dowel that's in part of the pump. We'll call it an idler gear, and this is the drive gear. So in order to get this off, you got to take that little itty bitty tiny clip off, and then the gear will come out with the body. And this whole thing will come with it. So when you take this off, the drive gear, like I was saying, is splined. So, not splined, but it's keyed. And there's the little itty bitty key that goes into this gear. Be very careful, because it does not come off without pulling that key out first. Be very careful that you don't lose that. You'll never find it again. It's so small. But this is the idler gear. It sits behind the pump right there. And you can see there's another drive gear there. And then this is the keyed. You can see the key on it. The keyed gear that goes back here again. And then the whole kind of kit and caboodle just sits like that. So I'll get this gasket scraped off, and then there is a seal right there that we'll replace, and then we'll put the pump back on. It looks to be in great condition. I'm very happy with it. So this is our gasket set from Jim's Gaskets, and as you can see, it's got literally everything. I mean, even from the rubber bands for the intake manifold, all the way down to your head gaskets and rocker box gaskets. It's got the final drive seals, all the different O-rings, so we're going to need some of these O-rings for our pump. And then, the timing cover gasket, everything. This is for the primary, which we're not going to use because we have an open primary. So now we just got to dig through here and find the oil pump gasket. So these were kind of in their own little bag, and this basically covers all the different oil pumps that there were. Because this kit is for 1966 through 84, and the pump did go through a couple different iterations. And this is why I say to keep your old gaskets if you can. That way you can match up what needs to go back on it. So I wasn't able to because I had to kind of rip it apart to get it off, but we'll match it. So as you can see, I found the right gasket for the pump body where it mates up to the engine itself. So we've got that on. We've got our drive gear. We need to get our idle gear back in here. Get that in. And then we'll get our gasket on. And this is going to be a little tricky to position this. You know what I can do? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I can use these two top bolts to kind of hold my gasket in. Just like that. Otherwise, we'd have to hold the gasket on ourselves. These will help locate the gasket. Oh, you know what? Almost forgot to put the seal back in. Let's do that real quick. Got the seal in. It does have direction. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell, but see, that side is flat, and that side has grooves. The groove side goes facing out. The old gasket off. So we'll put our new gasket back on again. Bloop. And put our bolts through. And drop our bolts on the ground. Ah! And then we'll just kind of lay this back down. We've got our idle gear in there, if you get my hand out of the way. Idle gear, and then as you can see, the drive gear is still on the motor. So we might have to kind of turn it a little bit to get them to mesh, but it shouldn't be too bad. Look at that, like a glove. So we're not going to tighten these all the way down yet because they tighten down all the way with the rest of the pump. Sorry, had a brain fart. So we'll get these bolts just kind of snug, finger tight, and then we'll put the gears back on here. So we get ready to put the pump face back on. We got the surface cleaned up, and again, we just need to find the, first try. We need to find the one that fits. Maybe I didn't get it first try. Second try. Got it second try. Better than nothing, right? So you can see the gasket that fits in there. And same thing, we'll put our, we'll just do the top two bolts to help locate it. All right, and then we'll go ahead and put those bolts in. Funny story, it's not a very useful pump without gears. I forgot to put these gears back in. So we'll get that one in there. Yep, that one there. And you know what? I got them mixed up. This one's supposed to be on the inside, so we'll take that part off again too. This is why you always organize your things. As you can see here, the two idle gears are different sizes. And that's what I messed up. The bigger one goes on the inside. And the way you know is it should be flush with the face. So we'll get that back on. Pull our gasket off. And then put our bolts back on. And do the same thing over again. I'll skip this since you already saw me do it. So we got the idle gears and the drive gear back in. We got the keyway installed. And we got the pump face put back on. Now, if you really wanted to, again, I'm pretty sure this engine was gone through pretty decently. But if you really want to, you can take these off to replace the ball valve, or the ball in the check valve, and the spring, and also the pressure regulator, which is just a piston that's also on a spring. I'm not going to do that because I just don't really want to. So, but if you wanted to, that's where these are. If you get a pump rebuild kit, that's where they are. This is an S&S pump, so that's how you do it. You just unscrew these. They make a tool that goes on this, since it's such a large like flathead slot that if you put a screwdriver in here, it's just going to wallow it out. But they make a tool that basically fits into that keyway and then gets on a 3/8 ratchet, I believe, and then you can spin those out. Again, I'm not going to do that.